I'd always thought danger was something that happened to other people. People on the news. People in movies. Not to me. Not to the daughter of a man who controlled more companies than I could count and could buy his way out of any problem. But the threats were real. The first was an anonymous letter slipped under my apartment door. The second came as a text from an unknown number. "We know where you are. You can't hide forever." The third was what finally broke my father's patience, a bullet, clean and cold, placed in a small velvet box. That's when he decided I couldn't be alone anymore. "You're not going anywhere without security," he told me over dinner one night, his voice calm in that way it always was when he'd already made up his mind. "I've hired the best." The best turned out to be 6'3" of quiet, sculpted muscle, wearing a black suit that looked like it had been made for him, and an expression that could freeze lava. "Miss Carter," he greeted me, his voice deep and even. "Mr." I glanced at the file on the table. "Reed, is it?" "Ethan Reed," he confirmed, his eyes locking on mine in a way that made me feel both assessed and stripped. Not in a sleazy way. More like he could read me, without words. "I'll be with you 24/7 until the threat is neutralized." The way he said it, "until the threat is neutralized," made it sound like I was some government asset in a spy movie. "I don't need a shadow," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I'm not some damsel in distress." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's not about what you think you need. It's about keeping you alive." That was the first time I realized something about him. Ethan Reed didn't do small talk. He didn't smile to make me feel comfortable. He was all edges and restraint. And for some twisted reason, that made me curious. The first few days, he kept his distance physically but never his eyes. In the car, I could feel him watching the mirrors. In my apartment, I could feel him standing in the next room, his presence heavy in the air like static before a storm. And every time our eyes met, there was something there. Not warmth exactly, but a pull. A gravity that made me want to step closer even when my pride told me to stay away. It was the night of my friend Tess's gallery opening when the first real crack in his armor showed. He insisted on checking every room before I entered. When I teased him, "What do you think? Someone's hiding behind the sculptures?" His hand brushed my lower back to guide me away from a group of strangers. That touch was electric. Just his palm, warm and firm through the silk of my dress, but it sent a shiver up my spine. I caught his eyes in that moment, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw heat there. But then he looked away. Still, that single touch stayed with me the entire night. The gallery opening was crowded and loud, the air heavy with the scent of wine, perfume, and money. Ethan stayed close, always within arm's reach, scanning the room with that unshakable calm of his. "You don't even blink, do you?" I asked at one point, leaning in so he could hear me over the chatter. "Blinking is overrated," he said without looking at me. I smirked. "Do you ever smile?" "Sometimes," he replied, still watching the crowd. "When?" "When there's a reason." It was maddening. His control wasn't just about his job, it was part of him. He carried himself like someone who'd seen things most people couldn't imagine and survived them. That kind of control was dangerous. That kind of control made you wonder what it would take to break it. Later that night, when we left the gallery, the cool night air hit me like a relief. He walked me to the car, opening the door with the same effortless precision. He did everything. But just as I was about to get in, a shadow moved across the street. "Stay here." His voice was low but sharp, and he stepped in front of me, his body shielding mine. I didn't see much, just a figure disappearing into the alley, but I felt the way Ethan's shoulders went rigid, the way his hand hovered near the inside of his jacket. The moment passed quickly. The figure was gone. But he stayed tense all the way home. That was the first time I saw him in my apartment after midnight. He didn't leave once I was inside like he usually did. Instead, he followed me in, his eyes scanning every corner. "You're staying?" I asked. "Until I'm sure you're safe," he said, already setting down a small black duffel near the couch. I should have been annoyed, but I wasn't. Something about having him there, his presence filling the space, made the place feel less empty. Around 1 in the morning, I padded out of my bedroom in a robe, unable to sleep. He was still awake, sitting on the couch, scrolling through something on his phone. "You don't sleep either?" I asked, pouring myself some water. He looked up. "Sleep's a luxury in this job." "Why do it then?" He hesitated just for a moment. "Because sometimes the person you're protecting is worth it." It was the first thing he'd said that sounded remotely personal. I moved closer, leaning on the kitchen counter, watching him. Who was worth it before me? His gaze met mine, and for a second, it felt like he might actually tell me. Then his jaw clenched, and he looked away. "You should get some rest, Miss Carter," he said, his voice softer but still guarded. I went back to my bedroom, but my heart was beating too fast for sleep. Because now I knew something I hadn't before. There was a story behind those eyes. And I wanted to know every chapter. The next few days blurred into a strange rhythm. Ethan was everywhere, at my side when I went to meetings, standing at the back of cafes while I met friends, walking half a step behind me through crowded sidewalks. At first, I thought his constant presence would suffocate me. Instead, it started to feel comforting. Dangerous, but comforting. One afternoon, after a charity luncheon, it started to rain. Hard. The city air was heavy with that metallic scent of wet pavement. Ethan didn't have an umbrella, so we ducked into the covered entrance of a closed bookstore. "You should have stayed in the car," he said, water dripping from his hair onto his suit. "And miss this." I gestured at the sheets of rain falling just inches away from us. "It's beautiful." He gave me a look like beauty wasn't something he allowed himself to notice. But then his gaze softened, just slightly. "You always find it in strange places," he murmured. The space between us felt smaller than it was. I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the faint mix of rain and his cologne. His hand was braced on the wall behind me, his body angled just close enough that if I leaned forward, a horn blared from the street, snapping me out of whatever haze I'd fallen into. He stepped back immediately, the tension breaking like a snapped wire. That night, I found him in the kitchen again, making coffee at 2 a.m. I teased, "Do you ever take off that suit?" He looked over his shoulder, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "Do you want me to?" The question hit me low and hot, and I knew he'd seen the way my breath caught. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and the warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by the same sharp focus I'd seen the night of the gallery. "We need to increase security," he said after reading the message. "The threats are escalating." I should have been scared. I was a little. But part of me wondered if the real danger wasn't outside. It was standing right in front of me, looking at me like I was both the problem and the solution. The next day, the escalation was clear. We left my apartment to find a note taped to my car windshield. "No one can protect you forever." Ethan's jaw was stone as he tore it down. He didn't say a word the whole drive. That evening, when we were back inside and the doors locked, I finally broke the silence. "You can't just shut me out. I'm trying to keep you safe." "From what?" "Talking about it? Feeling something." His eyes darkened. "You think this is about feelings?" And then, for the first time, he stepped closer, close enough that my back pressed against the wall. His voice was low, rough. "You have no idea how much I'm holding back." The air between us felt like it might ignite. His hand came up, fingertips grazing my jaw, and that was it. My pulse roared in my ears. I thought he was going to kiss me. God, I wanted him to. But instead, he took a sharp breath, stepped back, and walked out of the room, leaving me against the wall, breathless and shaking. That night, sleep was impossible. I replayed the way Ethan's hand had almost cupped my face, the way his eyes had burned into mine before he walked away. By morning, the city felt heavier, like the air itself knew something was about to happen. We were supposed to attend a charity gala that evening, a place I'd usually feel safe, surrounded by polished strangers and sparkling lights. But when Ethan handed me a small, discreet earpiece before we left, I knew he didn't believe we were safe anywhere. The ballroom was golden and glittering, the hum of laughter and clinking glasses masking the fact that Ethan's eyes were constantly scanning. I was talking to a woman in a red gown when I saw his expression change. He was moving before I even turned. A man in a dark suit at the far end of the room was watching me too intently, his hand slipping into his jacket. Ethan's arm wrapped around me in one motion, pulling me against him as he steered me toward the side exit. "What's happening?" I whispered. "Someone followed us in," he said, voice tight. "We're leaving now." We didn't make it to the exit before the man appeared in the hallway behind us. Ethan pushed me against the wall, his body shielding mine completely. I heard the unmistakable click of a safety being released. And then chaos. Ethan moved with a speed I didn't know was possible, grabbing the man's wrist, shoving him against the wall, and kicking the weapon out of reach. Another guard rushed in to help. By the time the police arrived, my hands were still shaking. Ethan's weren't, but when we got into the car, he didn't start it right away. Instead, he turned toward me, his eyes locked on mine. "You could have been," he broke off, his jaw tightening. I can't keep pretending this is just a job." I felt the words in my chest, hot and sharp. "Then don't." Something in him snapped. His hand cupped my face, and before I could take another breath, his mouth was on mine. It wasn't gentle. It was everything he'd been holding back: heat, need, frustration, relief. My fingers tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer, feeling the solid strength of his body pressed to mine. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "You terrify me," he said quietly, "because you make me want things I can't afford to want." I smiled, breathless. "Then take them anyway." That was all it took. The ride back to my apartment was a blur, his hand finding mine, holding it tightly like he'd never let go. Once inside, the tension between us ignited fully, mouths, hands, bodies learning each other like we'd been waiting a lifetime. It was heat and tenderness tangled together, every kiss deeper than the last, every touch a silent promise. Later, tangled in sheets and the steady rhythm of his breathing, I traced the line of his jaw. "What happens now?" I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time since we'd met, his smile was unguarded. Now I keep you safe. Not because I'm paid to. Because I love you." And when he kissed me again, slow, lingering, certain, I knew the threats, the fear, the danger, none of it mattered anymore. Because one kiss from my bodyguard had changed everything.